and Diabetes Canada, they launched kind of a first of its kind program to train mental health providers in Canada how to work effectively with the diabetes community. So this includes kids, teens, adolescents, young adults, older adults with type 1, with type 2, all the different major forms of diabetes, as well as caregivers and parents. So just to let you know kind of what this training generally involved, it was, the first part of it was, 6 modules, self-paced. People learned about diabetes basics, diabetes management, complications, diagnosis and adjustment, transitions. One of the, most well-known transition is pediatric to adult care, and the role of the mental health provider. After they completed these 6 modules, then they were invited to participate in a 3-hour interactive session where they had case studies, and they worked with the group to kind of dissect the case studies. So that's the training that everyone who you're going to hear talk has been involved in. And so today we have this panel of graduates from the Mental Health and Diabetes Training Program, and they are Carolyn. Oh, you know what? I'm going to actually put on so you can see the face of everybody. Okay, so it's Carolyn Weatherspoon, Charlotte Rosario, Tamara McKay, Sapphire Harpin, Lauren Moore, and Laura, I don't want to butcher your name, but Chiarenza. Unfortunately, Stephanie Robertson, who's on this poster, was not able to attend. And we actually do have an intern who is a provider in training who is also joining us, and she'll probably kind of introduce herself, but her name is Nicole Bango, and she's just not pictured here. Each panelist, they're just gonna, take 2 or 3 minutes to introduce themselves, talk about, their training background, their educational background, where they trained, where they practice in British Columbia. I think that's important because a lot of you were saying, does anyone practice in Northern BC or Interior? The ages of clients that they work with, they're definitely 2 or 3 people who work with pediatrics. So we definitely got the developmental spectrum represented. Their training orientation, that all that is kind of the, whether they are cognitive behavioral trained, if interpersonal, all the different kinds of perspectives that they might come in with. And finally, their hobbies and interests, and that's just so you can get a sense of who they are as a person. But before we start, I want to remind everyone that we're going to be videotaping. You heard that at the beginning, and the reason we do that is just so people who couldn't make it can, go on Spotify or the website to download it and listen. And then, as usual, there are 2 ground rules. Only 1 person talk at a time, so just be respectful of one another. And 2, if discussion associated with a specific question goes beyond a reasonable time, I'm just going to give kind of a warning signal indicating that a person has 10 seconds to wrap up their comments. So I'm going to just call people's name and have them introduce themselves. Carolyn, do you want to tell us a little about yourself?
Okay, well, hello everybody. It's so great to be here. My name is Caroline. I'm a registered clinical counsellor in BC. I did my training, my master's in counselling at Athabasca University, which is based in Alberta. And I live and I work in North Vancouver, but I also do a lot of my work online, as I think many of us have since the pandemic. In terms of the clients I see, mostly I work with adults. Either it's adults living with type 1 or parents who are looking after kids. I have 4 kids myself, none of them with diabetes, but I think that's just been a natural fit to work with parents. In terms of my training, I started with a background in narrative therapy, and more recently I've been working with ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. In terms of my sort of reason for being in this world, I've lived with type 1 for almost 35 years, so diagnosed at 18. So I have to tell you how excited I was when I discovered the training for this directory, because I just think it's such a life-changing thing to be able to access mental health support where people get what it means to live with this. And otherwise, what do I like to do? I'm an avid reader. I like to get outside. I'm very fortunate to live in the mountains here in North Van. dabble with art, got some pets, dog and two cats, and that's me. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Caroline. All right, number two, Charlotte. I think a lot of people know you, but it's great to hear you again.
Yeah. So, hi everybody. I'm Charlotte, and I'm really glad to be here with you on this lovely spring evening. Just like Caroline, I'm also a registered clinical counselor, and I practice. I work with couples, families, and individuals. Um, and I hold two master's degrees in psychology, one from UBC, the University of British Columbia. But before I came to UBC in 2018, I had already completed a master's degree in psychology from my home country, India, from Mumbai. And I've worked there for 3 years. My practice is in-person practice is located on West Broadway, near close to the Canby SkyTrain station. But I virtually work with clients across BC. In terms of the population I work with, about 50% of my practice is couples and relationships, and the rest, relationships meaning polyamorous relationship, different forms of relationships that people, um, you know, have, and the rest is a mix of individuals and families. And I work across lifespan, kids, teens, adults. In terms of working with young children, I like to see young children with their parents, with the families, because I believe in kind of empowering parents in supporting their children, while I also work with them individually with teens and children specifically. About my approach, I am trained and certified in emotionally focused therapy for children, for couples, families, and individuals. I also have certification in EMDR, the eye moment therapy, specifically used for trauma treatment. I also draw from cognitive behavior therapy, motivational interviewing, narrative therapy. But my home is in attachment science. That's my therapeutic home. I draw a lot from attachment theory. And what draws me to this work is my own lived experience of type 1 diabetes and Hashimoto's disease and celiac disease. I was diagnosed with type 1 when I was 12, and the other two conditions were uncovered. I think they probably always existed uh, closer to my 20s. Um, Outside of doing work, I like to crochet. I like to, engage my hands into crafts and art. And I also enjoy baking gluten-free food.
Great. I think there are definitely a handful of people who are celiac and have type 1, so I think your gluten-free food would be popular
Absolutely.
amongst that crowd. Tamara.
Hello, my name's Tamara. I am a registered counselor. I studied at City U University. That's where I got my master's, and also studied at UBC for a Bachelor of Education and a diploma in counseling psychology. I see mostly adults, but also adolescents. And I kind of say I see teens by day and adults by night. I work in a high school during the day. And then my private practice is working with families, relationship counseling, and often I'm trying to support parents who are struggling with their teens and type 1, or individuals with type 1 themselves. I'm connected in the sense that I have an adult son with type 1 diabetes, and woof, those teen years were a journey. Um, I draw from narrative therapy, strength-based attachment theory, person-centered motivational interviewing, a little bit of everything. And I see clients all over BC because I work virtually. Free time, I'm a foodie. And I like to kind of do a lot of DIY projects and get out, enjoy our beautiful city. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thanks, Tamara. Sapphire.
Hello, everyone. It's very nice to meet you this evening. Um, I'm also, like everyone else, an RCC and draw from a lot of the similar kind of styles that everyone's using. So, sort of narrative therapy, which is talking about the stories behind where we're coming from and how those have shaped our life and experiences. I also really love bringing in somatic work as well, which is bringing in that body awareness of how we're really feeling in the body and working with those kind of side of things too. I'm obviously British, if you can tell by the accent, but I've been in Canada for about 6 or 7 years now. I had an English master's in psychology, and then when I came to Canada, I also trained and did my counselling master's over here up in UNBC. So I had a real nice northern first experience of Canada, which loved the snow. I know not everyone does, but that was fantastic. As a therapist, I'm based in Squamish, but obviously also seeing people virtually, and I work just with adults. I do also have another counsellor on my team who couldn't be here tonight, but she's also fantastic. She's a Nova Scotian living with diabetes, similar style to me with narrative and somatic, but she also brings in a bit of artwork as well, and she also works with teens and seniors as well. As real people, I have my weird, annoying cat who is super sassy. I dabble in video games. I grow plants and tomatoes. And when it's sunny like this, I get out for a little jog or a walk if I can, because that feels pretty good. And that's me.
Thank you, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. So good to be here tonight and seeing a few faces that I recognize. I am also an RCC. I am based out of Kimberley, BC, and work virtually across the province. I did my training in Calgary, which is actually closer to Kimberley than Vancouver is, and so it's just a drive around the mountains. So at University of Calgary, I did my Master's of Counseling there. I work with being in a small town. I do work with all ages. And like Shallot, I believe it was Shallot that said, when working with children and youth, I involve families quite a bit for capacity building and see adults. I just don't do couples counseling or I don't see couples. I use a lot of EMDR. The eye movement, I feel like that's my specialty, and I actually don't use it only just with trauma, but as a way to zero in and dissolve distress that is stored in the cells. And so I incorporate a lot of all the other types of counseling, like I think so many of us do. So I'm excited for the questions tonight and just to, learn from each other and talk some type 1 diabetes.
Okay, Laura.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. I was like, and outside of work, Kimberly is like skiing and biking. That's what we do with my 2 girls and our dog.
And you're moving into a new home in 4 days, which is super exciting.
Yeah.
Okay, Laura. Oh, I think you're still on mute, Laura. Oh, it's still on mute. I think you pressed it and then okay. There we go.
Sorry. So sorry. Oh my goodness. Okay, sorry. I did my I'm a registered RCC. I work in Yaletown at a private practice there. I did my undergrad at UBC actually, and then I did my master's degree at Athabasca as well. And I've been working as a therapist for 11 years. I work with couples, families, kids, individuals. I definitely was trained in internal family systems and family systems work. So I do the full genogram and I do a lot of history taking. I definitely feel like I just naturally gravitated more towards cognitive work. So I do a lot of CBT work, trauma attachment work as well, and then, draw from other approaches. I have a daughter who is type 1 and was diagnosed when she was 11 years old, and she's now 21. She's at UBC in her third year. So that was definitely my motivation for wanting to help the community. And I am pretty busy right now, but I'm welcoming any type 1 clients because it feels like I could be definitely a good resource. And but everybody here is as well in that. So it's so nice to see people that are on the same boat. Because when I was seeking out a therapist for my daughter, I was actively looking for someone who had type 1 or at least understood what type 1 was. So now I can see all these people. I'm like, where was everybody? So I think as for me, I recently kind of went out of my comfort zone and I read from my grade 9 journal, which is like from the 80s, in front of a group of people at the Fox Theater, and through that ended up doing auditions for TV and commercials. And I've just been trying to kind of go out of my comfort zone lately and do things. I don't know if just me at my age or what is happening to me right now, but just saying yes to a lot of things and doing things to be more vulnerable. So because I'm working with people all the time who are so vulnerable and open, I was like, I have to sort of go out in the world and be a little bit more vulnerable. So that's probably the most vulnerable thing anyone can do, is really read from that period of time. Anyway, it was a lot of fun. So that was something I did recently. I probably have similar hobbies to everyone else in terms of food and cats and all those things. So yeah, but
Thanks, Laura.
That's me. Yeah.
And our provider in training, Nicole.
Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure and it's such an honor to be here. My name is Nicole Benko. I'm a counseling student. I'm currently completing my Master of Arts in Counseling Psychology with Yorkville University. I've completed 20 months of the 28-month program, and I've learned so much in those 20 months. I'm going to be supervised by Charlotte for the 8-month practicum portion. This is my second career. Before counseling, I worked in law enforcement for 15 years. 5 of that was with Canada Border Services, and I have 10 years service with the RCMP as a police officer, and I recently retired. So in that work, I developed a really deep appreciation for the power of empathy and human connection, which is something that I'm really hoping to carry forward into my work as a future counselor. I'm really interested in working with diverse populations, especially those impacted by type 1 diabetes. I was diagnosed myself as a type 1 diabetic at 12 years old, so I have a lot of lived experience with what that was like, being diagnosed with such a complex disease. I have 3 young children. They're 3, 5, and 7. They are not diabetic yet anyway, but in terms of my approach, I'm really, again, like I said, grounded in person-centered, empathetic, collaborative therapy. I'm currently obtaining additional training. As of today, I just finished my EFIT, or emotion-focused individual therapy certification. And I plan to continue additional training in motivational interviewing and DBT and CBT. As far as my personal hobbies right now, I did my first half marathon last year and I signed up for the full, which I'm doing in the next 2 weeks. So that has had its additional challenges with having type 1, but again, I've proved to myself that you can still continue to do things just because you have diabetes. And that's, again, kind of me in a nutshell. And thanks so much for your time. And again, I'm really looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. So I encourage everyone to, because this session is a little bit different. So if you have a question, just put it in the chat box and then I'll read it. I mean, we have a lot of pre-submitted questions, but since you're here, I definitely want to give you preference of asking anything. So that being said, I'm just going to start with the pre-submitted questions until I see something in the chat box. All right, this question is from Barb. What sort of issues are covered in sessions? Like, what do people present with? Is it diabetes related concerns? Is it general mental health issues? And what kind of things what kind of issues have you worked with for people who have diabetes in your practice? And then just raise your hand if you want to answer it. Okay, Carolyn.
I would say it just really depends. I mean, some people who live with diabetes or have it in the mix, it's kind of incidental, but they're just happy to have somebody who understands how much it weaves in with the things that they're struggling with. And for other people, diabetes is front and center, and it's everything from new diagnosis to maybe just feeling sort of fed up or burnt out, or maybe having particular sort of issues related to it. So it's really, for me anyway, a big spectrum of things.
Okay, can I just follow up? Barb, would you want to follow up if you're on screen? Okay, so Caroline, when it is front and center, what is the usual issue that is front and center? Is it something about management? Is it something about, diabetes related to stress? Like what are
Yeah, if it's front and center, I mean, there's usually a piece that's related to sort of distress or burnout. I'm always a little cagey of using that language because I prefer to use the language my clients use than for me to kind of give it in advance. But yeah, that people are really upset with some aspect and feeling like it's really getting in the way of them living their life in a certain way. Feeling very fearful of certain things, or really feeling so overwhelmed by all the sort of management piece of it, that it's just sort of feeling like it's sort of taking all their time and attention.
Okay. Anyone else on the panel want to answer that question? Lauren.
Yeah, to echo Carolyn, I would say like emotional distress, whatever that looks like. Sometimes that's the presenting issue that someone knows what they're talking about, or it's underlying, kind of like fuel in the fire. But one thing I like telling people is that you don't even have to know what you want to work on or talk about coming to counseling. That is not you don't need to know. That's kind of it's also part of my job, is to help figure that out. And so it's kind of like you can't do counseling wrong. So if you have a sense that it might work, we'd figure that out together. Which, when we were all talking about being client-centered and collaborative, that's kind of like an example of what that could even look like.
Okay, thanks, Lauren. Sapphire, I saw your hand raised.
Yeah, I would echo that. Those are lovely words, Lauren, that you can't do therapy wrong. And some of the favorite work that I do is when a client maybe comes in thinking that they're wanting to talk about this, and within a few sessions, we've gone all the way over here and we found something else. Heck, I know I've done that being a client myself. So that there's definitely no wrong place to go. I also find that similar to how Caroline was saying, sometimes it's front and center and sometimes it's not. Sometimes we're in a totally different area, not talking about diabetes at all. But there's still that feeling that we're hitting a wall or there's a barrier. We're just unsure where it's kind of coming from. And sometimes that's a really great place to get really curious, as sometimes there is like, oh, I'm really frustrated here. I'm really burnt out. Like, I'm having to manage these things all the time. And sometimes there is, well, hey, you've been doing that quite a lot with your diabetes as well, right? So sometimes it's almost so habitual to live with, but there is still that background tax. So sometimes shining a light on that can then suddenly help a completely non-diabetes kind of theme find a different direction and a bit of movement.
Thanks, Sapphire. Anyone else want to answer that? Okay, I'm going to go to question number 2, which is very practical. It's from Anonymous. How can I access affordable mental health support specific to adult type 1 diabetes in my area? And Nicole, I'm looking at you only because I know like you're the person who probably has a sliding scale.
Yeah, I saw Charlotte with her hand up too, but
Okay,
we have discussed that during my practicum under the supervision of Charlotte, that I'm going to be offering low-cost sliding scale sessions for individuals that don't have benefits or don't have financial access to their mental health related to their diabetes. So I don't know if I missed anything there, Charlotte, but yeah.
Totally. That's right. And I offer sliding scale to clients who do not have insurance coverage. So when I have type 1 clients reach out to me, and if they're really struggling to, they really need help and are struggling to pay for the session, I consider lowering my prices. 15% of my practice is usually low cost or pro bono. So that's an option. You could always reach out and we could talk about it.
Okay, so given that MSP doesn't cover counseling for chronic illness, of the people who, again, you see who have diabetes, what percentage are just covering out of pocket versus they do have extended healthcare? Like, what's the breakdown for anyone? Sapphire?
I'd say the wide majority of my clients are private pay, or a few people have really, really good benefits that will cover really consistent care. But it is a sad fact that counseling is expensive, and consistent care can have a really, really strong impact. So I'll talk with clients about what's financially affordable, and we'll talk about how we pace sessions. So especially if there's limited finances, most clients will find they'll get more benefit from therapy if they do a dedicated 2-3 month block of sort of weekly or bi-weekly rather than one session every month for a year. So being able to have that upfront discussion with your counselor is really, really fantastic. It's okay to talk about finances and money. We know that exists. And it's okay to kind of strategize with your therapist about how you can maximize that. Like Charlotte was saying, there's a sliding scale over there. I think most counselors, most of us, I think, will offer sliding scales. Most of the time we'll have a limited number of places, but it's always worth, if you're finding like a connection or a particular counselor that you're drawn to, there's no harm in flicking them an email and saying, hey, do you have any sliding scale spots? It can also be helpful to look at what type of provider. So we're all RCCs in the room. The associate that I have on my team, she's a registered social worker. So sometimes people have benefits that will cover a social worker or a clinical counselor. And again, that's a really, really important distinction to help find.
Okay, and anyone on screen, if you want to follow up with this question, just because it's a pretty general, pragmatic question.
To respond to Ed's question in the chat box, Ed, I offer counseling virtually online over Zoom. So that's an option for folks living in interior regions of BC.
Great. All right. So the next question is from Anonymous. There's a whole bunch of a string of questions, but I'll do it sequentially. The first one is, how can being diagnosed as a child affect mental health throughout the rest of childhood and into adulthood? Lauren.
And I know that this question is based on my use of eye movement desensitization therapy. So EMDR assumes that when we have an experience, when we have an experience, we remember the experience, and sometimes we remember the experience with an emotional charge attached to it. And that emotional charge we carry with us throughout our childhood, throughout until we're older. And that charge can almost be like a weight in the backpack. And it can also be the way we've interpreted set experience, such as my diagnosis at age 7. I was feeling overwhelmed, and then I had a lens of I'm not safe, I'm in danger. And so that lens I had and the weight of the backpack, which was mostly emotional, that impacted me later in life. And so eye movement helped me dissolve that distress and shift my lens, which then has created kind of a light feeling I have about diabetes now. And so that's an example of EMDR as a way to go back and care about the things that have happened to us, because we carry that with us, whether it's diabetes or not.
Okay. Anyone else want to answer that question? Laura.
Figured out how to unmute. Yes. Also, I was going to say, as well that, growing up, I can't do therapy without doing trauma work anyway. Diabetes, anything, childhood and causes that carry over affect everything, how people communicate, how they attach, how they their fight flight responses, how they deal with conflict. And so I think diabetes type 1 or diabetes in general is like so I think just I was interested the EMDR approach, but similar to that too is kind of a a more mindfulness or CBT approach where because I think what happens, and all the diabetics I know, and they tend to have to, especially as children, push a lot of those experiences down just to survive being children, just to kind of like be able to, you can't, it's too much for a child to have to deal with at that time. I mean, it's not as being diagnosed later is very different than being diagnosed as a child. So having to transition into an adult and then suddenly deal with those experiences and emotions, it's as if the coping has been from shutting off and shutting down and kind of fawning in that way. So now it's helping people understand that they can access or deal with those emotions using kind of more cognitive behavior approach where you're trying to make some meaning or shift a narrative into something that is more vulnerable, I believe. So I don't know. I think that's important to kind of do because you're not discounting so it's kind of hard to convince to try to show people that what helped them to cope at one point in their life was really useful and that now they can kind of take another approach and look at what is actually going on. So that, if that made sense. Yeah, that's it.
So Laura, I'm interested now that your daughter was diagnosed as a teen. In hindsight, does she tell you how she was feeling at that time? And do you tell her what you were feeling at that time? Because you certainly don't want to share your feelings when they're kids. Because
she was 11, and so we had to kind of like, it was really survival at that point. We weren't able to really, we were all in shock, and so we're just trying to manage in management mode constantly. And I remember one time we're passing by the hospital, and and this is like, I've already just started doing trauma work at this point. And she actually goes into and this was so real. I mean, she just went into she's sort of hyperventilating. She was remembering every moment of that first 3 days that you're in the hospital. I know I was like going to relate to this. The first 3 days you're in the hospital and you're being told how to do injections and all. And she was actually able to talk about smells and colors. I couldn't believe it was just post-traumatic stress, right in front of me. And she was just sort of hyperventilating. And she doesn't have a lot of panic attacks, my daughter. So this was very intense. But so Trisha, what was your question?
Oh, just that, when they're young, you don't want to, of course, you're not going to share your feelings of what's going on because you might be anxious or scared. But I just know adults who, now that they're adults, they ask their mom and dad, what was really going on? Were you scared? Were you this? And like what they hear is like, whoa, it totally didn't seem like it when I was a kid.
21, this is the first time she's kind of looking at me going, wow, I can understand your experience, because most of the time it was her diabetes. We were all thinking it was our diabetes. We're all working as a family, and she's like, no, this is my diabetes. So to come later and go, okay, now I see, like she can now see, she's sort of more cognitively developed to be able to see the bigger picture. So it's a lot to work through. Like you're doing a lot of work going, how did you feel about your family then? Like how do you see it now? And I think it helps people process through the whole experience. I think you have to go back in time to deal with the present. So I always do that on any given day. So but it's interesting.
Colleen has a question that she just put in the chat box. Can diabetes affect mental health, like anxiety and depression, more during perimenopause and menopause? I know this is more of a medical question, but if anyone happens to know. Sapphire?
I'm going to be brave. I have no idea, but I don't think we talk about the menopause enough. And anxiety and depression is massively impacted during perimenopause and menopause because it's a huge period of transition. And my light assumption will be anything where there's a lot of transition period going on physically in the body, either physically or emotionally, is going to still be impacting the mind. So I wouldn't be surprised. Either way, I think it's completely valid to still be asking these questions. Colleen, great question. Let's be really curious about it. And it may be really interesting to reflect on, like, what does this bring up for me? Or like, why is this particularly coming up? And start pulling those threads on the diabetes, the anxiety, the depression, the perimenopause, pulling those separate threads and seeing where they're all connected.
Okay. Colleen, I'm not sure if you came to our session 2 months ago, but Geraldine Pryor is an expert, world-renowned expert in T1D and women's health and menopause and perimenopause. So if you want to go back to the website and then download that session, please do. Also, the one great thing about being part of the huddle is whatever I'm connected to, you're connected to. So if you want an answer to that question, I'm happy to connect you with Dr. Pryor, and she's very, very humble and gracious and happy to answer whatever, questions people have. All right, Charlene asks, there are so many different therapies like CBT, EMDR, et cetera. What are the differences exactly, and how do we know which is the best approach for ourselves? That's a great question. That's a question I want I want an answer to. Just raise your hand if you're ready to. Charlotte.
I think Tamara had her hand raised before I did. Tamara, why don't you go first and then I'll follow?
I was just going to start with, I am such a believer in that relationship with client and counselor, and that yes, we are all going to have our preferred modalities, and there are going to be certain modalities that really fit a certain client. But at the end of the day, do you feel comfortable with the counselor? Are you feeling like you can be vulnerable? Do you feel like you can tolerate the sound of their voice, or you like their face, to be able to just relax and open up? So I just feel that what's most important and how you know if the counselor fit is for you is if you can feel that relationship growing. That's all I was going to start off with.
Charlotte, do you want to follow up with?
Yeah, Tamara, you kind of spoke my mind. So it's not, it's research proven when they studied what therapies are more effective. The common factor that they found was the relationship between the client and the counselor. So in life, um, so to go back to the previous question about how does being diagnosed as a child or as a teen impact your mental health? Um, and I think it's less the diabetes and more the how was the diagnosis dealt with. We get wounded in relationships that do not, or for their own good reasons, are not able to meet the need we had in that moment. Your parents were probably too busy looking after you, keeping you alive, so they couldn't attend to the fear that you felt in your body that now has been living with you. So somehow we get wounded in that relationship, and so we are wounded in relationships, but we also heal in relationships. A relationship that is safe and secure, where we can be ourselves, that's a space where we heal. So it is the relationship that's more important than the therapy we practice. Of course, it's important, the therapeutic modality, but it's only 10% is what research tells us. 90% is how you experience yourself and the therapist in that space that the therapist holds for you. That's more important. So finding the right therapist, I would say, is more important than the right modality.
Laura.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it's funny that there's a percentage. I remember it being 80%. Now it's 90%. That's fantastic. But I think that's so important what everyone said about the like the feeling you have with the therapist. And I think oftentimes like this is a question that's going to come up later, but I really wanted to answer this question because it had to do with somebody who was feeling that therapist. It's hard to feel like the relationship itself is already very strange. Like it starts as this business exchange in a way, honest to be honest. Then you sit with this person, and depending on how authentic that person is. But what I wanted to say specifically to the differences in therapies and how to use them, it depends. Because if someone comes in and they're not ready to do the kind of work that you would need to do to say, like do some kind of cognitive restructuring or deconstructing of thinking and how to make, moving thoughts from irrational thinking to rational thinking and balanced thinking. If they're not ready to do that, then you're starting off just doing, working with someone, being able to be in the space with them, being able to take your time. So I would say there is no one size fits all, because you can understand, you have to be able to understand that person in front of you and what they need at the moment. So to decide what therapy, because this is to the question, to decide what therapy is going to work versus what's not, I think you definitely know that it becomes clear when people become quite goal focused at some point, like they actually want to make a change, because that's not necessarily the goal of therapy all the time, is that something's broken that needs to be fixed. So I guess to that person's question, that there's as long as the therapist is quite familiar with the different approaches, they would then intuitively maybe know where to go next in terms of tools, um, or a more experiential approach with people, if that makes sense. So that, I don't know if any of that made sense, but
It does make
it
sense,
did to
but you know
me.
what? I'm gonna talk from like a total layperson, but
Yeah.
can someone just tell me, what does EMDR look like? What's going on in EMDR? What does ACT look like? What questions are that there is a therapist asking? So like from someone who is totally naive about therapy, like even cognitive behavioral, I know we throw that word around, but
Yeah.
what exactly is cognitive restructuring? Like, give me an example.
So
So
sorry.
because I'm just thinking that a lot of people are naive in the sense that they don't have enough to know, even to imagine what that difference is.
I'll answer the CBT question because I cannot answer the EMDR question because I don't do EMDR, but the CBT, I kind of summarize it like this. There's, people don't sit around and think about, say, like their tendency to have black and white thinking, or all or nothing thinking, or catastrophizing, or fortune telling, or minimizing positives and magnifying negatives. And with type 1 diabetes, that's a lot of that. You're always thinking about what can go wrong and your blood sugars, and you're constantly thinking about what you need to be worrying about. So CBT is helping you, first of all, identify what an automatic thought is, like what they call hot thoughts. It's like, this is the hot thought. This is the thought that's upsetting. And then to take that thought and then to kind of change the thought into something balanced. Because really, it's, if you're afraid, if your first thought is, I can't walk over this bridge, and then your second thing is going to be the feeling of, I'm scared to walk over the bridge, then you won't walk over the bridge and you won't know what's on the other side. So it'll stop you right there. So you're really just, all you're doing is really taking thoughts, and you're trying to kind of notice, because we're not doing that. We're not sitting around all day going, oh, I had this thought that this person didn't like me, so why do I even bother trying? Like, we don't sit there and do that. So CBT is forcing you into that. If that makes sense. Yeah, that's how I would describe it.
Lauren, you explained EMDR to me once, and I really like it. It helped me kind of envision it. So would you mind just describing what it is?
Sure. And I can use my own example of it if that helps. When we have an experience, our brain stores an image of that experience, whether it's a representative image or an actual image of something that happened. And so that image it's information. It's how our body is storing that event or that experience or that ongoing experience of diabetes. It when you An EMDR therapist would activate the distress. It's almost like we have to invite the emotion into the room in order to gift it the eye movement. And I'll explain what that does. So you pair the image, which when I did EMDR on my diabetes diagnosis, the image was me, age 7, kind of like shocked like this in the room with my mom behind me and the doctor, and I remembered it all very clearly. It was clear for a reason because I was storing onto it. And then the words that paired it, the belief that it was paired with, or the file folder that image was stored in my brain was, I am broken, I am not good enough. It was a pairing of those two. And so when you pair the image plus the interpretation or the file title, then you, right in that room, right in that moment, you activate the distress and you kind of get curious about where it's located in the body. For me, those two memories were stored here and here. And that was the distress that I was holding on to from that old memory. The eye movement, which our bodies do at night when we're in REM sleep, the eye movement dissolves the distress. So I had to be okay sitting in it. But when the counselor did the eye movement, and it really is like moving your eyes back and forth, and that's all tailored to the person, it dissolves the distress because essentially all the information that's stored in that file is being reprocessed. And that's the R and the eye movement to desensitize or take the charge out and to reprocess the information, to make sense of it. when we are having an uncomfortable, traumatic, or overwhelming event, we store that information sometimes maladaptively or in an unhelpful way. So EMDR is helping your body take the same information. I didn't fly back in time and change that event, but the way I was storing it, we used eye movement to help my body hold on to that information in a more helpful way. And that's the desensitizing. And so you can do that with a single event, or you can do that with an ongoing narrative, an ongoing experience you're having, whether it's type 1 diabetes or parenting or being a student or anything. And just to follow up just on that other question, I weave in CBT, like we all weave in all these different approaches because we're all trying to do the same thing. We're trying to honor what's happened to you, what is happening right now versus kind of instead of what's wrong. And we're trying to take the stigma out of all these labels of things, anxiety, depression. And we're just trying to normalize that life is really hard and how we store it is let's get curious about that. So perhaps your body could store it in a different way, maybe a more helpful way. But that's defined by you, not by me. And so you get to be a big part of that process.
Charlotte, I see your hand, your cartoon hand.
Yes. Uh, yeah, I appreciate how you explain EMDR, Lauren. And I had a EMDR teacher who said, who gave this image of a washing machine. He said, if you overstuff the washing machine with clothes, it won't wash the clothes properly. And then, in a few days' time, you kind of go, where's the stink coming from? There's a stink in the house. And it's coming from your washing machine because it was overloaded. It's something similar when you're overloaded with something so big, it kind of is your brain is unable to process it. And so you then get symptoms, you get flashbacks, you get fears, you get all these other sort of the sting from the clothing. So when you do EMDR, it's like you restart the process, you make it easier, you make it lighter, and you wash each piece of clothing dry and fold and keep it, in an organized pile in a way that doesn't kind of give you that stink. Yeah, and I thought I would explain emotionally focused therapy. There was a question in the chat box about how do I think around something around how do I stop feeling guilty when I know I'm doing everything right, but my blood sugars are still and not in range. So with emotionally focused therapy, I would just get curious about how, so in a way, there is a discrepancy between what you think and what you feel. You know that I shouldn't be feeling guilty. I'm doing everything right. You know I shouldn't feel like I'm failing at this because there is no winning at diabetes. Everybody keeps telling you that, your doctors, your healthcare team, and yet there's a part of you that continues to feel guilty. So there is, in a way, no alignment between how you think and what you feel. So then we get curious about where is that feeling coming from? How do you experience that feeling? And in EMDR, we say emotions is a target and an agent of change itself. So we sit with that guilt, we sit with how you experience it, we try and understand where you learned that from. Maybe at some point in your life, you learn that when things don't go your way, somehow you're responsible for it. Maybe it's a way you establish control over something that is so out of control and can feel so scary because this beast is really not something that we can always control, and has such negative impacts on our lives. And then we sit with that guilt and we work through it. I wish I could explain to you the entire process, but we don't, we don't have that kind of time. But in a way, we sit with that, we revise that for you so that how you feel and think can become more aligned, or how you engage with yourself when you feel guilty, when you feel like you're failing, shifts. And so your experience with diabetes shifts, because sometimes what the guilt can do is it can prevent you from treating your diabetes effectively. I feel so guilty and I feel so ashamed that then I stop treating, then I burn out faster. And it becomes a feedback loop. the more I feel, the more my numbers are out of range, the more guilty I feel. The more guilty I feel, the more I give up on diabetes. The more I give up, the more guilty I feel, and you get trapped in that loop, and we then break that loop so that you can be, yeah, you can be engaged with yourself differently and in your diabetes.
There is a question in the chat box. Can EMDR be done virtually?
Yes.
Is it just less effective?
No, it's equally effective. There's a ball that goes across the screen and people follow the ball and they do eye movement. And yeah, even people that I meet one-on-one, sometimes we try it online and they like that instead. So we meet even though we're 10 kilometers away from each other.
Okay, great. I just wanted to make everyone aware it's 6:53. We usually end at 7, but if if any of the panelists are able to stay for another 15 minutes, 7:15, please do. And then if any of the attendees are able to stay, please do, because I have a feeling there's other questions people have. All right, so the other therapy that I kept hearing that you several of you practice is narrative therapy. Can you just 2 sentences describing what that is? Caroline.
Hi. Oh, it feels being put on the spot to have to condense something down to.
Sorry, no, you can have 5 sentences. You can have 5 sentences.
But one of the reasons I was drawn to narrative therapy is because long before I did my therapy training, I did my undergrad and graduate degrees in literature. And so I like the idea that we all have a narrative, a story that we tell about who we are and our experiences and what they mean and what they say about us. And sometimes we've kind of written that in a way that's really not helping us. And so in a sense, narrative therapy is a way to help us look at, like, how do we look at this story and almost edit it in different ways? We can't change it, but we can change how we're talking about it, how we're telling the story, and what that means for sort of now and moving forward. One of the pieces that I really like about it is it's very collaborative. It's tailored very much to exactly whoever you're working with. It really allows you to be curious, and it really allows you to have a pace that's particular to every person. So I think, I'm sure others can can add more to what I've said, but that's kind of the basics of it.
Anyone else want to? Sapphire?
I love Caroline's description. Yeah, that piece of like that storytelling. One of the parts that I love as we're doing that storytelling is pulling out the threads of the different parts or the different characters. And sometimes we're often externalizing something so we can make sense of the story, because when we make sense, we feel a little bit more secure. And yeah, when we're looking at the different parts, sometimes it's external characters and seeing how they've impacted our lives. And sometimes it's also our internal parts. I'm not sure if Caroline does kind of those internal parts work as well, but sometimes it's diabetes as a character of its own. And sometimes it has the whole little image in its storybook. And when we're working with those parts, that then opens up a space where we can kind of have conversations almost between maybe our younger self and our diabetes and maybe our parent, and get some of these conversations processed in a space that we wouldn't normally get to access. And obviously when we get to have the conversations, we often find a different space for resolution, and that can open up a space for a new narrative. That's it.
Okay. Now I'm going to shift and ask another question that's, a totally different subject. It's from Anonymous. Hoping the speakers will touch on teens and type 1 parenting issues, as well as long-term issues related to, long-term burnout. Oh, Tamara.
Oh, the teen years are so challenging for a lot of people anyway. And I find for a lot of my clients who are parents of a teen with the type 1, you're dealing already with that sort of negotiating control. I want to go out later. I want to have independence. I want to manage my social media without you looking at it. And suddenly you are in a situation where your parents are used to, let me see your sugars. Did you bolus? What are your carbs? And do you have a site in? Did you do a site change? And it is natural and normal for a teen to, again, want that independence. But unlike a lot of other teen issues, natural consequences are so high that it's really painful and terrifying for a lot of parents. So when I'm working with teens, it's about finding that empathy of like, of course it's normal that you want that independence, and it's normal for you want to do things on your own, and trying to help them see a little bit of where their parents are coming from. And when parents are struggling with that responsibility transfer, right? And understanding that their teen can often be burnt out. They are dealing with social pressure. They often want to be normal. They want to have that risk taking. Like, I just want to go have a milkshake and French fries with my friends, and I do not want to test, and it's going to be fine. I know my body. So there's that push and pull all the time. At one point with my own team, the bar for a while had to be stay not dead. That was the bar of like, you're going out, and could you just stay not dead, and we'll deal with everything else. So if you miss a bolus, if the sugars are a bit high, just if you hit that bar, we'll get through everything else. But it is difficult. The other thing with teens I find in parents, and it makes parents a little uncomfortable, teens are now often dealing with their sexuality, and they're having their first relationships, and they want to feel sexual and attractive. And how do you navigate that in a setting where you have scars, or you have bruising, or you have a pump site? How do you disclose that to a partner when you're 15 or 16? So there's all these things that we forget as adults that teens are navigating. And then there's all these things as teens of like, how do you communicate this to your parents? So I love working with parents and teens just because, again, obviously have a little extra empathy there, but it's so fascinating, all the different aspects that they have to negotiate. And it's unlike many other things that parents of teens are navigating. This is a whole other level because it's so intimate, right? You've helped them put the needles in, you've helped them change their sites, you've looked at their bruises, and suddenly it's like, don't look at me, and they want that whole privacy thing. So it's a journey.
Okay. Something you said, Tamara, that really resonated with me is that, I tell people, when they walk into the office, you say, well, you're alive. Obviously, you're doing something right. Tell me that. What is it you're doing right? Like, what do you think because it's that strengths based, like focus on the strengths. So I think people get surprised because what they're usually accustomed to is their endo saying, why is your A1C at 9.5? So it's all of a sudden that sense of like, what did you do wrong?
Yeah. And teens are already on the defensive about so many things, and they are so sensitive to feeling criticized. So when it's like, well, why are you running so high? Or you were low, or when they have the monitors and parents are texting them during the day at school of, and answer me back. It's a lot.
Anyone else want to, yeah, Nicole.
I just want to speak anecdotally, hearing Tamara speak just there. I've never heard someone like I felt validated as a 13-year-old newly diagnosed person for the first time. I've never heard someone actually like talk about diabetes in that way, and it's so powerful. So it's such a specific lived experience, and I just wanted to say thank you because it's so complex, and unless you know, you don't really know. Like I've had my own journeys in therapy, and I don't even talk about my diabetes because I'm like, my therapist isn't going to know what happens unless you really have to educate them. So yeah, that's all.
Laura.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on. I think that was important to bring up the piece about just being a parent, like outside of type 1, you've got this new added complication, but like being quite a sex positive, open-minded parent where you can, because they were like, there's 40 over, I don't know, whatever, over 45 things that affect blood sugar, and sex is one of them. And I thought that was really interesting because the more you can remember too, because you spend so much time talking about blood sugars all day, that you're actually a parent, that if you create a space, because actually, in my case, it was the opposite of a teen that was rebelling. It was a teen that was also afraid to do anything. So afraid to go out or drink alcohol or go for a jog. So, in the opposite, now you're trying to do something very different. You're trying to empower them. And for me, that's so important to encourage parents to be able to talk about things like sex and to be able to talk about things like just the normal teen stuff and create if you create an open space for kids to do any of that, so kind of unconditional love as opposed to this means this and this means that, and trying to kind of like scare kids into checking into doing good, and you can do the opposite of that, and they can come to you and say, hey, when I'm kissing my partner, my blood sugar is like going high, like, which I feel so proud my daughter could do. I was like, good. So to me, that as long as you can create that a type of a space for kids, like, I think, because it's this whole other thing that we shouldn't even have to be doing. We should just be able to have that relationship with our kids. So yeah, I just wanted to point out sometimes it can be the opposite of rebelling. It can be just a total fear. Like if you have a child who's not going to break the rules, for example, and doesn't want to get in trouble or drink too much, then yeah. Anyway, that was my little input there.
Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to comment about that topic? Okay. The next question, does diabetes chemically affect any part of mental well-being? I've had what felt like depressive episodes after severe hypoglycemia. So I don't know if this borders on medical, but if anyone wants to just even talk about a personal experience.
We could talk about heart math. Heart math is when you actually put, this is a counseling tool that I used in elementary schools. When you put a heart math monitor or you're measuring heart rate variability on your earlobe, when someone is stressed, frustrated, I think that's the main thing. If you look up heart math, stressed, frustrated, stressed, their heart rate variability is all over the place, which basically just means there's chaos in the system, in the cells. But when you drop in and you sink into a joyful feeling or joy, gratitude, one of those comfortable emotions, your heart rate variability looks very different and it's very coherent. And so emotions impact what's going on in our cells. And so that's one way to look at the reason why we're trying. Like, I think all of us, you can hear it, we're all trying to care about and talk about these emotions because emotions just want to feel seen and heard. And when they get to feel seen and heard, they come down a little bit. And so I think that's kind of a medical side of why we care about it so much.
Did the person who asked that, or does anyone want to follow that up? Okay, so I'm going to ask a question that kind of summarizes everything under strategies, because there's a lot of questions, but how can individuals with diabetes better manage their mental health, especially when dealing with the daily challenges of managing the condition? Do you have any specific strategies or resources that can help improve emotional well-being while managing diabetes? So this is a huge kind of big general question, but happy to hear each person's strategy. Lauren.
I would say I find it helpful to give yourself permission that it's hard. It's hard because it's hard. It's not hard because you're not doing A, B, and C. And so I find that permission to let it be hard, and I find that helpful. And then ... You can go from there. But
okay, Sapphire.
I think you've had us talking about themes and narrative a lot, so that would be my starting point. Sorry. So depending on what it is that you're struggling or looking for specific strategies for, I would go back to the root of that, of well, what's the pain point for you? And that's often going down into sort of quite an emotional area. What's my narrative that's getting stuck? Is it that I'm getting fear responses? Is it that I'm getting guilt responses? Is it that I'm getting super cautious or super reckless kind of reactions or emotions coming up? And once we are starting to understand the emotional kind of root that's going on, it's from there that we could start building out different strategies or different supports. Sometimes there's emotionally processing going on as well. my guess is, I know my approach is to work with the meat of whatever it is with the emotion, and then sprinkle tools on when they're relevant. I don't think anyone here can say, hey, yeah, just do a breathing exercise, and it's not as simple as that. I think we all know that. So understanding the emotional complexity, and then sometimes there are going to be kind of really little helpful, tangible tools that we can sprinkle in.
Laura.
I think just quickly to add on quickly, I think just practical application like play or reach out to a friend, like create an existential kind of meaning around, like make some meaning out of all of it. Because how can you do that? Like with diabetes, you kind of want to say there's no silver lining. This isn't, but you have to work a little bit harder to do that, to kind of make sense of what it's, because I used to hate it when people would tell me like, look on the bright side. I really did hate that. But I think that is kind of what you end up doing over time in therapy, is to understand how, you've been the resilience that you have, the things that have come of it, and to just get out and do things that are, other than mindfulness and breathing and trying to relax. It's more so that people in general, I'd say not even with type 1, just type 1 diabetes, forget to play. Like they forget to go into that optimal place of just connecting with other people, playing, relaxing, doing things that are fun. They're so busy. They're so much in management mode, and especially with anxiety, that you're always in a heightened state. And that's the thing with therapy. You're trying to kind of like the fight, flight, and the freeze. You're always trying to be in that optimal window, or the window of tolerance in the middle. And people don't do that, especially with diabetes, because it's a double, like it's like double duty. You're trying to be happy just in life with just the regular things, and then you've got that on the side. So I think it is creating some kind of meaning is important to do in therapy as well. And yeah, just those prescriptions, obviously sleep, play, cook, do things that play with your cat, do things that are just, and make an effort to do that too. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. Shallot, I see your cartoon hand.
Yes. Laura, I like what you said about play. And I tell my clients, I don't just work with type 1, I work with other folks with other chronic illnesses as well. And I tell them, let's not wait for things to be perfect. That might never happen with a chronic illness that you live with. And I tell this to myself too, what can I add an experience of joy, pleasure, play? Into my life. Can I maybe have, my arm hurting or my sugar level high, and still maybe take myself out on a walk, or go on a walk with my husband? Can I add a moment of joy while I navigate this pain? And that always helps me, to not wait for perfection, but to add that joy, wherever I can. And then I say the C's: counseling, connection, compassion, care, communication, all the C's. Practice the C's. That's the best strategy I've found.
Okay, so I'm gonna it's 7:11, so I'm gonna have one last question to read out, and this is kind of more a person who wrote kind of a lengthy question, but I want to be able to kind of summarize it and do it justice. But what do you say to someone who believes that seeking mental health support is the most artificial and meaningless form of human connection? Essentially, if a person has had really bad experiences with their mental health interactions, the provider being racist, the provider being unprofessional, and really kind of leaving that experience gun shy to even want to try another provider. So, Laura?
I really wanted to answer this. I hope I'm not talking too much, but that question, I totally understood it. I mean, I think when you're looking for a teacher, a doctor, even an RMT, even a best friend, like it's gonna be this process. You can't, unfortunately, if you've had 3 negative experiences, which I often hear clients say, like I've had nightmare experiences, and I was dead. I was for sure going to try not to create that same scenario for people. But I think it is kind of you are a little bit shopping, I think it's easy to kind of give in quickly to that feeling because you can't expect a therapist to fix the problem. It's not about that. It's about the duality, the egalitarian relationship of two people working together. And once you start doing that, it's so powerful. Like I can tell you that I went in skeptical, just like that person. And I was like, well, I don't really know how can I help people? And I have all these tools and I'm going to use all these therapies. And it didn't become about that at all. It became about an extremely human, authentic, deep, profound experience. If you meet the right counselor, and that person has a clear understanding of tools and can really, because I think what people see is there's a lot of reflecting and a lot of parroting. Like, I see what you're saying, I feel what you're saying. It doesn't sound authentic. And I think there's a lot of therapists that have been able to take all that they've learned in school and apply it in a really human, authentic way, but it doesn't. And I really feel I was, in school, I really felt like, how am I going to do this in an authentic way? And that just takes time. So I would say also going with experienced therapists that are very confident. And I think, just don't give up is what I wanted to say. But I really felt that question very deeply because I felt that way in therapy, where I felt like I was talking to somebody who was more robotic and not connected to me. And I don't think that's ever going to be, it doesn't matter how intelligent that person is. I don't think that's ever going to be therapeutic. Was that too harsh?
No, that was great. The
Yeah.
person who asked that, I mean, it was
Yeah.
anonymous, but does anyone want to follow that up or have a follow-up question about that? And any other panelists want to weigh in on that comment? Okay, Sapphire.
Yeah, I think Laura really covered it beautifully, and I think we all felt it in our hearts when we read that question. I think we've all had experiences where clients have had horror experiences, and I think all we can say is that we're sorry you've had that experience. It is completely valid. It sucks. And if at some point you have the energy to try again, we hope you'll find the right counselor. I know we spoke a little bit earlier about finding the right connection and about the different therapy styles. And I think we highlighted how it's the relationship that is really important. I describe, when I do intro calls with clients, I describe them like speed dating. And essentially it's like, hey, this is me. We're going to chat so you can decide essentially if you want a therapist, date me. Not in a weird way, but in a like, this is my vibe, let's see what it's about. Sometimes we do talk about therapy styles, but quite often it's just that space for, you're hearing my accent or how I'm talking. And so sometimes orientating yourself to that can make it just a little bit safer, hopefully going into any new relationships. It's really okay to kind of prepare questions or think about what kind of therapist you want. And that might not be therapy styles at all. Like, I have a warm but blunt kind of style. I swear a lot. I've done really well. I've not sweared at all today. And that's really, really important for some of my clients. For some of you, you might hear that and be like, oh, I definitely don't want to work with Safa. That's okay. You maybe want to work with someone else. So sometimes thinking about kind of what characteristics or traits you want from a therapist, that's a great place to start if you have that energy at some point to try again.
Tamara?
Just that the right counselor will meet you where you are without judgment. And that trust is nothing that a counselor should ever demand. It's something that comes over time and that we earn. And everything else that was said before, I totally agree.
Okay, well, we're 2 minutes past 7:15. I really want to thank our panelists. It's so exciting for me to see this just because, again, I'm part of this mental health and diabetes group that developed the curriculum, and to see you all talk about your practice, to share your thoughts. It's so rewarding. I mean, I'm just so happy that you're all in the same room. And I'm assuming that there are people on screen are going to be interested in reaching out. So if you are interested and you don't know how, just contact us at T1D Huddle and we can make the connection. But I'm assuming that all of you, it would just be a matter of Googling your name and getting to your clinic, as easy as that. So, everyone, you've got so many people, so many options in terms of when you're seeking counseling. And I can, I feel so confident that every single person on this panel is just so excellent and so authentic. I'll say that. Yeah, and that's really, really important. So thank you again. And if you have any feedback, feel free to send it our way. And if you're interested again in specific topics for the huddle, just also send that our way. Our door is always open. So I want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much. And have a really great night.